many of you have ever heard of King Wenceslas? Wow, it's surprising. It's an old Christmas carol that we used to sing when we were little. Good King Wenceslas looked down on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cruel. When a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel. Good. It's a story that happened about 1,000 years ago. He was a king in a country called Bohemia, which is now part of the Czech Republic. It's near Germany. And he had an interesting life. His mom was a complete pagan, and they persecuted the Christians. They exiled a bunch of priests from the country. But his grandmother, who was the mother-in-law, his dad's mom, really loved God, and she brought Wenceslas up as a little boy and taught him the Christian faith, and not just about the prayers and the rules and things, but how to live his faith. And so as he became older, he became king instead of his mother being the queen. His mother subsequently had her mother-in-law, his grandmother, choked to death by assassins. And Wenceslas himself became king, and he was a great king. He loved poor people and would do anything for people. He built churches, did all kinds of other things, and he lived just an exemplary life, and people loved him. But his brother was at odds with him, and he invited his brother to make peace with him, invited him to a dinner, and he came. And the next day, which was the day after Christmas, it was September 28th, today, he met him on the steps of the church and punched him. And his brother's henchmen came and killed King Wenceslas, and I believe they threw him into the river to drown him. That's why we celebrate the feast today, but the story behind the song is that one day was the day after Christmas, which is when we celebrate the feast of St. Stephen on December 26th. It was a really snowy, cold winter night. It was the day after Christmas, and he looked out and he saw this poor man just wandering through the snow, looking desperately for twigs and pieces of wood, because apparently he didn't have enough money to buy firewood, to just have a small fire in his home to keep him warm that night and his family. And he asked his servant, "Who is that?" And he told him who it was. He said, "You go, gather meat and gather food and gather bread and follow after me." And so he tucked his robes into his boots, and he and his servant loaded up with firewood and as much food as they could carry. And he was walking through the snow. It was very deep, with the servant following behind him, and the wind was blowing and the snow was falling, and it was just bitter cold. And the servant tried to keep up with Wenceslas, but he was so excited about his mission to help this poor man during the Christmas season that he didn't seem to feel the cold. And finally the servant stopped and he said, "My lord, I'm so sorry. I can't go on any further. I'm just frozen." He said, then instead of stepping through the fresh snow, step in my footsteps. And a miracle occurred that every time he put his foot in the footsteps, or where the king had put his feet before, warmth came up from the ground and warmed him. And so he was able to make the rest of the journey and carry that food to that man. And 1,000 years later, we're still telling the story at Christmas time. We're called to be like King Wenceslas, to be kind to strangers, to be kind to our neighbors, and to be kind to people that aren't even kind to us, as he was to his brother. As he was dying, he asked the Lord to forgive his brother for what he had done. Just think what our world would be like if we, like that servant, followed not in the footsteps of King Wenceslas, but in the footsteps of Christ. How much warmer would our world be?